You really are like a parasite, always holed up in your room playing games. This isn't a game, it's my job. I'm sick of your excuses. Hurry up and prepare dinner. I'm hungry. Unable to endure the daily criticism from my mother-in-law, I'm determined to execute a certain plan soon. My name is Sherry and I'm 27 years old. For some reason, I have been living with my husband's family for the past 6 months. Tom and I have been married for almost 2 years. I primarily earn from an internet business at home and make a steady profit. I started a blog out of curiosity in high school and immersed myself in the internet world, but my desire for a normal romance never completely vanished. However, spending most of my time at home in front of the computer, I had few opportunities to meet men and no friends to introduce me to anyone. Then I thought of registering on a matrimonial site or a dating app to easily find a partner. I decided to take the plunge and register on a dating app. Registering felt like crossing the Rubicon, hoping to meet someone wonderful. As a result, I coincidentally met Tom on the dating app. Thinking, if he's weird, I'll find a reason to leave quickly. I waited at the meeting place and saw a man with a refreshing smile. Before I knew it, my face was bright red. Tom, sensing my nervousness, initiated various conversations. Thanks to Tam's talkativeness. Even though I'm a shy person, I got completely absorbed in our conversation. After several dates and visiting various places, I thoroughly enjoyed the time walking with Tom even though I was usually glued to my computer. A month after meeting him, I confessed, "Would you be my boyfriend?" And we started dating. I was surprised at myself for making such a bold move. A year into our relationship, Tom proposed, saying, "Let's get married." I replied, "Are you sure about me?" Of course, I had no reason to refuse. My parents really liked Tom and were overjoyed about our marriage. They were concerned I might end up single for life. I also visited Tom's family. Tom's family included his parents in their 50s, a sister 5 years older than him, and his grandfather, all living together under one roof. Tom didn't talk much about his family, but eventually I understood why. His grandfather seemed kind, but the other family members kept their distance and responded indifferently. His grandfather didn't seem to be very close to his other family members. My father-in-law was rough in speech and seemed careless. My mother-in-law was a bit too flashy for my taste. She bragged a lot, having graduated from a prestigious women's university. Both were not my type. My sister-in-law, a part-timer, also graduated from the same university but seemed dissatisfied with her post-graduation part-time work. Although both of Tam's parents were working, they didn't have a stable income and ended up relying on his sister's part-time earnings and his grandfather's pension. Considering the wedding expenses, we decided against having a ceremony and just registered our marriage instead. It was also because I wasn't comfortable having it publicly. Tam's apartment was too small for two, so we looked for a rental apartment. I needed a workspace, and splitting the rent was manageable for us. A year after marriage, Tom said seriously, "I need to talk. My grandpa at home is ill, and the family isn't helping." Tom wanted to live with them to support his grandfather, as his other family members weren't helping him. Despite my apprehensions about living with his family, I agreed to his decision. So we moved from our apartment to his family home. The move went smoothly, but the house was smaller than expected for 6 people. Excluding his grandfather's and sister's rooms, only his parents' room remained. We had no choice but to share the common spaces with them. While I work from home on my computer, my in-laws seem to view it as mere play, always casting doubtful glances at me. During such times, his grandfather said, "Sherry, having you here is a big help. I'm grateful." He continued, "I'm sorry the house is cramped, so I'm actually considering an extension." I was surprised and stared back at him. "Wouldn't it be easier for you to work if you have your own room?" "I've already got a quote." "Don't worry," he said with his usual smile. Soon, a construction company known to Tam's grandfather started work. The plan was to add 2 new rooms to the family home at the corner next to the garden. Amazingly, his grandfather also paid for our temporary hotel stay during the construction. About a month later, the extension was completed and we returned to the family home. Thanks to the new rooms, each family member now had their own space, and everyone was very happy. Sometimes that guy does something good. My usually quiet father-in-law suddenly said that coldly. I couldn't help but feel incredulous and thought to myself, that guy. How could he refer to his own father like that? After starting life in the renovated family home, I realized several things anew. Just as Tom had said, his parents and sister really didn't help with anything. It was no wonder they couldn't care for his grandfather. Their rooms were always messy, never cleaned, and no one prepared meals. They just ate pre-made meals or boxed lunches in their own rooms. Initially, I thought they were just busy since we had just moved in. But in reality, nobody did anything. I had wondered why there was so much plastic trash, and now I knew why. Grandfather had given up on the situation and bought his own lunches. Concerned about his health, I offered, if you'd like me to, I can cook meals for you, Grandpa. He was hesitant at first, saying, I can't ask you to do that, but when I insisted, I'm not working outside and I'm always home, he agreed. If Sherry is offering, then maybe I'll accept. The next day, I started preparing breakfast and dinner for the whole family, including Tom and myself. As I announced, breakfast is ready, the family gathered one by one, quietly starting to eat. I didn't expect to be thanked, but since no one had ever prepared breakfast before, I thought someone might say, thank you. However, only Tom and Grandfather did. The other three ate silently, and I felt a bit uncomfortable. But hearing Grandfather saying, I'm grateful to have a warm meal, really touched me. Are you okay doing this on top of your own work? Tom was concerned. Then, my father-in-law complained, the food is good but bland. Are you adjusting to Dad's taste? Hearing this, my mother-in-law coldly remarked, really? Such poor seasoning. How were you raised? Maybe you should study cooking a bit more, my sister-in-law, who seemingly never cooked, added sarcastically. I felt more sadness than anger and almost cried, but I held back, forcing a smile. I'm sorry that it's not to your taste. I'll be more careful next time. Since then, my parents-in-law and sister-in-law, seeing I didn't get angry, increasingly pushed household chores onto me. I do work from home, but I'm not playing around. I have a lot to do. However, to my in-laws, it seemed like I was just playing on the computer. Clean the room after you're done, my mother-in-law demanded, and my sister-in-law chimed in, clean mine too. When I refused, saying, please clean your own rooms, my father-in-law shouted, who do you think owns this house? You can't do anything. Go out and earn some money. I continued to be criticized by my mother-in-law, playing games on the computer all day. You're really a parasite. I'm not playing. This is my job, I initially argued. But they never listened, so eventually, I stopped responding. They were probably dissatisfied with me working on the computer at home while they worked outside. The concept of remote work seemed beyond their understanding. Moreover, my sister-in-law insulted me. You only graduated high school, right? Just playing on the computer? Are you unemployed? Are you dumb? Frustrated, I consulted Tom. Did my sister say that? Unforgivable, exclaimed Tom as he headed to my sister-in-law's room. My sister-in-law came out lazily and looked down at him. What? Do you need something? You don't understand anything. Sherry is actually working at home. She's not unemployed. As Tom argued, my sister-in-law sarcastically said, what can you do on a computer? I get you're defending your wife, but it's laughable. It seemed impossible to get through to her. I seriously began considering whether I should leave the house. But that would mean ignoring Tam's concern for his grandfather. I was deeply troubled. Then, suddenly, his grandfather fell ill. Although he had been stable, it seemed his heart condition had worsened. Tom didn't want to worry me and kept silent, but this was his real concern. Despite life-saving efforts at the hospital, his grandfather passed away soon after. Losing our emotional support in those difficult times, we were at a loss about what to do as a couple. However, we first had to start preparing for the funeral, while holding back our grief. Tom and I transferred his grandfather from the hospital and proceeded with the funeral preparations. My father-in-law, who had always disliked his serious father, seemed inwardly pleased by his death. He pretended to be sad in front of the mourners but quickly became lazy when alone. My mother-in-law did the same, showing tears in front of guests but complaining and showing annoyance privately. My sister-in-law didn't even come out of her room. What was happening with this family? I, grief-stricken by his grandfather's death, felt anger toward them. My father-in-law made a serious face and attended to the mourners during the funeral. My mother-in-law and sister also looked sad, but it seemed like they were mocking us. It seemed so fake to me. Tom, who was dearly loved by his grandfather, proceeded with the funeral while holding back tears. He was commendably different from his other family members. After the funeral, my in-law's attitude changed drastically. My father-in-law coldly said to his father's photo, "Good thing you expanded the house before going to heaven. You were a burden, but you were useful in the end." My mother-in-law added, "Right, having more space is a relief. It feels refreshing, and it would be better if the annoying ones leave." My sister-in-law glanced at me and commented. Approaching them, I said, "I understand that our presence is a bother. If that's what you wish, I'll leave." Now that grandfather was gone, there was no reason for us to stay. Hearing this, my father-in-law shouted, "Finally decided to leave? Get out, parasite." My sister-in-law said, "You're not family or anything. I've always disliked Tom for being too serious. I dislike you even more, so leave quickly." My mother-in-law continued, "You're bad at cooking and cleaning, neurotic and weird. Just leave quickly." I tried to remain calm and told them, "Okay, I'll leave, but wait for a week. I need to prepare for the move." Tom and I had already planned to leave the house. We had decided living with my in-laws was impossible and had already chosen a place to move to. We intended to take grandfather with us, but he passed away before that. There was no turning back. We had to move forward. A week passed, and the moving day came. "I'm leaving then," I said politely on purpose. "Get out. You were always in the way." My father-in-law rudely retorted. "You've been living in my house and can't even say thank you," he continued. "I'm leaving, but I've been paying the mortgage for this house," I counted, and he laughed it off disdainfully. "Unemployed people playing on the computer can't possibly pay the mortgage. Stop lying," he retorted mockingly. That's when Tom intervened. "Dad, you thought Grandpa was paying the mortgage, but it was actually too much for him. So, Sherry decided to take over it. The mortgage was in Grandpa's name, but Sherry had been paying for it." My father-in-law looked surprised and incredulous. "No way. How much is she earning anyway?" My father-in-law asked. I calmly replied, "Well, I earned about $20,000 last month." My mother-in-law and sister-in-law looked skeptical at my casual response, but it didn't matter to me. It was the truth. "Now that Grandpa has passed away, you, as the heir, will own this house," I said with a smile. My father-in-law raised his voice, of course. "What are you talking about?" Then I continued, "So, please take care of the inheritance tax. Oh, and don't forget about the remaining mortgage." My father-in-law turned pale. "What? You said you were paying the mortgage." "Yes, I was paying for it, but it was to help Grandpa. Now that he's gone, I'm not obligated to pay." My in-laws looked astonished at this revelation. My father-in-law hesitantly asked, "So, how much is left on the mortgage?" I deliberately didn't give a clear answer. Probably about $100,000. My father-in-law collapsed in shock. Also, all the furniture and appliances purchased during the renovation were bought by me. A moving company will come to collect them later. They were speechless, but it was no longer our concern. With that thought, we decided to leave the family home. "Take care and goodbye," I said with a smile as Tom and I walked away. I had no regrets. Tom and I quickly moved to our new apartment. After unloading our things, Tom murmured, "We just couldn't get along with that family." "Huh?" I looked at Tam's face. Tom slowly began to open up. Grandpa was the only one who was always kind to me, like a real family. I was surprised at his words. Dad always told me to work. It became unbearable. But this is for the best. Tom said that with a relieved smile. By now, the family home would be bustling with the moving truck. Most things would be gone, except for the new furniture and appliances we bought. Maybe we were a bit harsh, but after being insulted for so long, it seemed hardly enough. Sometime after moving, the phone rang. It was probably from the family home. I deliberately ignored it a few times before answering. "Hello," I responded. From the other end, my father-in-law's angry voice came through. "Why is the inheritance tax so high? I never heard anything about it. I can't pay this, and the mortgage payments are so high. Plus the utility bills. What should I do?" I had anticipated my father-in-law wouldn't be able to pay. I knew the land prices in the area around the family home were rising. An increase in inheritance tax was easy to predict. Moreover, because my in-laws were all either regular or part-time workers, they were barely managing on grandfather's pension. They couldn't afford the mortgage payments. The extension was possible because I was paying the mortgage. "If you can't make the payments, you'll have to sell the house and use that money to pay," I suggested calmly. "Help us. We're family." I was wrong before. "Please help," my father-in-law pleaded, but I no longer considered them my family. Family. My only family is Tom. I also heard that Tom was adopted. "I've said we're no longer involved with you. Please don't involve yourselves with us either," I stated firmly and hung up the phone. I heard shouting from the other end, but I didn't need to listen anymore. Half a year later, I happened to pass by the family home and saw it in disrepair with a for sale sign and the realtor's contact information. It seemed the family home had to be sold due to financial difficulties. It was truly regrettable that the extension made for us by grandfather was all for naught. I wanted to end any involvement with people who treated their family poorly. With that thought, we left the family home. According to neighbors, my father-in-law, facing financial difficulties, had borrowed heavily from multiple consumer lenders. Since even that was not enough, he even resorted to illegal lenders and was ultimately cornered by debt collectors. To manage that situation, they eventually sold the house to pay off the debts. However, the debts weren't fully settled, and now they live in a small apartment, with my father-in-law and his family having to work multiple jobs and long hours. We've settled into our new home, and I've finished organizing everything. I now have my own workspace and a comfortable environment to work in. My newly started online shop is doing surprisingly well, keeping me busy. Tom's job is going well too, and he seems likely to get a promotion. I sometimes think back on our days at the family home, but I never want to experience anything like that again. Now, Tom and I are living happily together. Oh, right. Actually, our family is going to grow. After moving, I felt unwell and visited the doctor, where I discovered I was pregnant. The baby is growing healthily inside me. Will it be a boy or a girl? I ponder this while choosing baby items. Tom, too, seems excited about our new life. For him, raised as an adopted child, this baby will be his first blood-related family. I'm sure grandfather in heaven is smiling down on us. I'm really looking forward to our future, walking together as three: Tom, myself, and the baby. I'm praying for the baby to be born safely. Lately, I've also been trying knitting. I'm knitting socks for the baby, but I'm not very good at it yet, so I keep knitting and unraveling. I'll be good at this by the time you're born. I tell the baby in my belly. My name is Lindsay. I'm a 29-year-old company employee, and this year means I'm getting older still. I met Jake, a year older than me, through friends, and we decided to marry 6 months after we started dating. Jake, who made a name for himself in tennis during his student days, is an active person who continues to play tennis even now. As I was in the tennis club during my student days, we immediately found common ground together. Once we started dating, we would often play tennis together on the weekends. One day, after our date, Jake proposed to me, and we decided to get married. It's been almost 3 years since we got married. We don't have children, but we bought an apartment after getting married and have been living together ever since. Both of us work, and while we aren't struggling financially, we can't say that we're wealthy either. We're living a happy life. However, something happened between us that shattered my peaceful days. One day, Jake suddenly asked me to come to his parents' house. Surprised, I hurried there to find Jake, his parents, and an unknown woman waiting for me. As I struggled to understand the situation, Jake suddenly knelt down and said, "Lindsay, I'm truly sorry. The truth is, I've been involved with this woman here, Olivia. Last week, we found out that Olivia is pregnant. I feel responsible for her and the baby. So I think it's better that we separate. I'm sorry, but I want a divorce." Jake shocked me with this revelation. Exposed to his infidelity, the pregnancy, and faced with his demands for divorce, I was stunned. That was when my mother-in-law spoke to me. "Lindsay, please forgive Jake. Yes, he cheated, but the problem lies with you too. You and Jake weren't really a good match from the beginning. So, I'm sorry, but please forget about him." And my father-in-law added, "Olivia's father is an executive at a major company. A man in a totally different position from someone like your poor father. I think you know who's more suitable for our son." I couldn't believe it. Jake's father belittled not only me, but also my father too. Normally, parents would put the blame on their son for cheating, but Jake's parents didn't seem to think that way. Instead, they seemed to think it was natural for us to divorce, and that their son had done nothing wrong. I took the divorce papers and said, "I understand what you all want to say. Being with people who have such warped thoughts might affect me too. I'm shocked at how you make it seem like I'm the villain despite Jake's infidelity. Don't worry, I'll file these divorce papers myself. I'll leave the rest to a lawyer." And with that, I quickly left the scene. As I left, my father-in-law mockingly said, "A poor person hiring a lawyer? What a waste of time and money, when she doesn't even have any. She shouldn't bite off more than she can chew." Ha ha ha. Ignoring him, I left his parents' house and immediately went to City Hall to file the divorce papers. At least I was able to end my marriage with Jake. The next day, surprisingly, Jake and Olivia came to my apartment. Seeing me, Jake said, "Oh, you're still here? You haven't even packed your things. You're taking your time, aren't you?" Hearing this, Olivia also looked at me curiously. I was furious at Jake's words. "What are you talking about? You're the one who should be taking it slow. This is my house, so you should be the one to leave. The movers are coming soon to take all your belongings to your parents' house. If there's anything you don't want them to touch, you should take it now," I retorted. Hearing this, Jake suddenly panicked. "What? This is my house. The ownership should be in my name," he exclaimed. I was dumbfounded. After all, this apartment was bought in my name. I had already told Jake about this, and about my family's background before we got married. But it seems that Jake is the type to conveniently forget things that don't suit him. Perhaps this carefree nature is why he was easily swayed by Olivia. I showed the deed to the apartment and my name was clearly written on it. Jake's face quickly changed upon seeing it. Meanwhile, Olivia's face began to cloud over with anger. "Jake, what is this all about? This is completely different from what you told me before. Were you deceiving me?" Olivia began to confront him. This is strange. What's happening?" Jake responded in confusion. "That's not an answer. Explain yourself." Olivia pressed on. "First, this is my house, so please take your argument outside. And just so you know, Jake has various debts. So if you're planning to marry him, be prepared for that burden." I calmly stated the facts to Olivia. Hearing this, Olivia seemed about to say something, but I didn't care and kicked both of them out of the room, slamming the door behind them. After a while, I could hear them arguing outside the door, but it eventually quieted down. About an hour later, the movers finally arrived and took all of Jake's belongings to his parents' house. The room was now clean, and I was relaxing in the newly organized space. But it was short-lived. Suddenly, the intercom rang repeatedly. I cautiously opened the door with the chain lock still on, and my mother-in-law was standing there. Hello, is there something you need? Lindsay, why did you keep such an important thing a secret? What are you talking about? I can't believe it, but Jake just told me that this apartment is in your name and that your parents are the owners of that famous restaurant chain. It seemed Jake finally remembered my family's circumstances. What about it? If I had known, I would never have let this divorce happen. A daughter from such a wealthy family. We would love to have you back in our family. Lindsay, please, reconsider and start over with Jake. I was shocked and at a loss for words at her outrageous request. I couldn't possibly agree to what she was asking. You really have a terrible way of thinking about things. Am I not a human being? Are you only interested in money? I'm sorry, but I don't want anything more to do with you. There's nothing more to talk about, so please leave, I said and attempted to close the door. But my mother-in-law, infuriated by my attitude, raised her voice in anger. Don't be so arrogant. I'm giving you my permission to reconcile your differences. Fix things with him right now. I won't leave this spot until you agree to get back together. Open this door immediately. She said this, pounding on the door repeatedly. I decided that I couldn't handle this alone and called the police. They came and took my mother-in-law away. Even as the officers were taking her, she was shouting something loudly, but I no longer cared to listen to her words. There was a reason why my in-laws were unaware of my family's business background. My father, coming from a poor background since childhood, continued to live modestly, even after becoming a company president. He never considered buying branded clothes. He always took great care of his belongings and used them for a long time. Hence, at our wedding, he wore a suit he had bought decades ago. Seeing this, my in-laws assumed that my father was not financially well off and misunderstood his restaurant chain as a small, privately owned business. As a result, they never delved deeper into my father's business. Time went by without them understanding the true circumstances of my family. Days after managing to send my mother-in-law home, Jake tried to persuade me to reconcile our differences. His persistence was incredibly exhausting. It was surprising how insistent he was, despite the fact that he was the one who proposed the divorce. He seems to have a talent for quickly forgetting inconvenient truths. I opened the door, keeping the chain lock on, and Jake, upon seeing me, began to speak with teary eyes. Lindsay, please, let's give it another try. Everything is my fault. I'm truly sorry. I still love you. Let's be together again. He then explained a sudden turn of events. Olivia had apparently approached Jake aiming to get his house, pretending to be pregnant to sway him. However, once she learned about Jake's considerable debts, she gave up and fled, and now Jake was coming to me to seek reconciliation. Huh? What are you saying? I don't know anything about that. How can you say that? After you cheated and brought up divorce, now that she's left you, you want to get back together? There's no limit to your audacity. I have no intention of getting back together with you. Don't ever come here again. I refused Jake right there and then. Surprisingly, he quietly left. However, this was not to be their last attempt. Days later, Jake's entire family unexpectedly showed up at my workplace. They were shouting, "Bring out Lindsay. Get that woman out here. We know she's here," causing chaos in the office and leading to the security guards being called. I stood there, dumbfounded by the situation. But they wouldn't have things their way any longer. I worked at the headquarters of my father's company, and that day, my father was also in the office. All of my colleagues also supported me. Hey, what are you doing? This is my company. Don't just barge in and make a scene. I know everything you did to demean my daughter. Don't ever come near her again, and never set foot in this company again. My usually calm father shouted furiously at my ex-in-laws. Everyone, including the employees and Jake's family, must have been surprised at the anger of my father, who usually only shows his gentle and calm side. Sorry. We're really sorry. Jake's family desperately apologized. My father's stern words had immediately quieted them down. As they were being escorted out by security, My father shouted in a strong voice, "Don't you ever come here again, and never do something like this again. I won't allow it. You understand?" Hearing this, I couldn't stop myself from crying. I felt a deep sense of gratitude that my father had gotten so angry for my sake. Later, through the company's legal advisor, I decided to seek damages from Jake's family. I sought damages for the divorce due to Jake's infidelity, for his persistent attempts at reconciliation after the divorce, and for the disturbance at my workplace. The total amount was substantial, and I eventually received payment from them. I also made them sign a written agreement promising never to come before me again. Jake's family's state of affairs rapidly declined thereafter. Chased by the money owed to me and Jake's existing debts, they ended up selling their home and moving far away. In town, the story spread that Jake had committed adultery, divorced his wife, and after being abandoned by his mistress, attempted to reconcile. Facing such embarrassment, they could no longer stay in this town. While I felt a bit of sympathy for them, I also knew that everything was a consequence of their actions, so it was clearly deserved. Jake's family never appeared before me again. Finally, I was able to resume my peaceful days. However, my father had harsh words for me as well regarding what had happened. He blamed me for not recognizing before the marriage that Jake was a person who would commit adultery and accrue debts. Certainly, while Jake was at fault, my lack of insight was also partly to blame. Unable to argue with my father, I felt disappointed and disillusioned with marriage. I felt that I needed to give my heart a break. However, about a year later, I decided to marry my colleague, Matt. Matt was sincere and earnest in his work, trusted by everyone. I was initially attracted by his personality, but as we started dating, I was also drawn to his lifestyle. His life was surprisingly simple. He never indulged in branded items, used everyday things for a long time, but generously spent money and spoiled me on dates. His behavior was very similar to my father's. My father, who usually saves money, would splurge on family trips, bringing us joy. I deeply loved and respected my father. Realizing Matt's actions were similar to my father's, I felt that I could be happy with him in the future. Therefore, I decided to marry Matt. I was worried about being scolded by my father for remarrying within a year of my divorce, but his reaction was surprisingly positive, probably because he had heard of Matt's reputation at work and knew of his character. There was nothing bad said about Matt, and from my father's perspective as the company president, Matt seemed to be performing exceptionally well. "I feel confident that Matt will take good care of you, Lindsay," my father told me happily. Matt and I were happily married. Not long after our marriage, we discovered that I was with a child. The happiest person to hear this news was undoubtedly my father. I was so glad to see my father happy. Reflecting on my time with Jake, where we didn't have children even after 3 years of marriage, it seemed like a stroke of luck. Matt and I plan to take over the company in the future. We are currently learning the basics of management from my father. Although there are many challenges, we accept that they are our responsibility as successors, and we are working hard together. We believe that we will need even more effort for the sake of our upcoming child, despite all that's happened. I am now very happy. Together with my family, we intend to firmly support this company in the future.